Jazakallah. Thank you. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فوضوا أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم على بذكر الله تطمئن القلوب صدق الله العلي العظيم زينوا مجالسكم بالصلوات على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman here in New York or across the globe wherever you're hearing my voice, Salamun alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question: what is the role of the masjid in Islam? We're told there's a moment in time where Rasulullah enters into the masjid, and when he enters into the masjid, he sees two groups of people, and everyone notices that there are two groups of people. One group is in ibadah and worship in the form of namaz and salah and du'as and things of this nature. The other group that is in the masjid during the time of Rasulullah is in a state of discussion, of talking, of tafakkur, tadabbur, ilm, and tadreed, to learn and to teach. They are teaching one another about principles of the world and life. And at that point in time, there's two groups. One is doing the salah and dua, and the other group is discussing and talking about Islam and learning. At that point in time, the narration says that all of the companions and the people, they began to look at Rasulullah. And when they began to look at Rasulullah, they were wondering, where is Rasulullah going to go? Is he going to join the people who are in namaz and salah, or is he going to join the people who are in a state of where they are discussing and learning and teaching? And at that point in time, Rasulullah noticed that the people are looking at him. And they were looking at which one will he give preference to, which one will he emphasize, which one will he go towards, which group. And at that point in time, the narration say that Rasulullah noticed this and he looked at the people and he said, both groups are doing good, both groups are doing right, both groups will get to their end goal if they follow this path. But I have been sent to teach the people, therefore I will join this group that is in teaching and learning. The principle here is, what was the role of the masjid during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and what is the role now? In this era, in this time, it seems we have a one-size-fits-all model for the Imam Barga, the masjid, the Husainiyah. There's one main lecture, for example, and you go. Alhamdulillah, here you have a few programs, but in most places you have one main lecture, and a person like me comes, and you have to address and attend to the needs of the eldest person in the audience, and the youngest person in the audience, and everyone in between. And each one has a different focus. That young college student who has just come from university, and maybe they've had a discussion with other Muslims, or Christians, or someone else, and they need to know, what is the history of Christianity, what is the history of Judaism, what is the history of Islam, what is the history of Shiaism. Maybe they need a different question answered in a different area. And for example, that elder person who's there, who's thinking about, for example, akhirah, because we only begin to think about akhirah when we have haqqul yaqeen, and we know that we're about to leave this world. We don't think about it before that. So maybe they also need something attended to. Or maybe that parent who has young children who needs advice about how to raise the children according to the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt. So you notice the way that the Ahlul Bayt operated and Islam operated in Rasulullah was these circles that would be there in the masjid. And in these circles, some people were discussing namaz and roza and hajj zakat, and some people were focused on, for example, tafakkur and tadabbur. Why does Allah say about the stars? Why does Allah say about the heavens? Why does Allah say about the earth? Why does Allah talk about all of these things in the horizon? Sanurihim ayatina fil afaq wa min anfusihim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran. We put for them signs. Sanurihim ayatina fil afaq wa min anfusihim. We put signs for them in the horizons, in the afaq, and within themselves. Meaning what? Meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us signs that are macro and micro. You know, you They study microeconomics, macroeconomics, the idea of the big picture and the small picture. That's why, if you look at even today, most of the stars in the galaxy that we have identified and named, most of them have Arab or Persian names. Even today. The reason was the people who helped find these or lay the groundwork to find them were from the Arabian or the Muslim world at large. Arab, Farsi, or Muslim world at large. So they contributed for a long time. But where did that focus come from? The focus came from they're reading the Quran and Allah saying that we have put signs in the horizons, or Allah is saying, or Ibrahim is saying, look at the star, and He's inviting the people to think in a different way. So all of these things inspired people. Over 700 verses of the Quran, or there's over 6,000 verses. 700 plus are focused on tafakkur and tadabbur in some form, either explicitly or implicitly. Tafakkur as-sa'a, Rasulullah said, 1 hour of reflection is better than 70 years of ibadah, 70 years of worship. So that sitting and taking my book, my textbook for biology, chemistry, mathematics, physics, whatever subject you're studying, and to connect that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Quran, that's also ibadah, dalil. There were two ways when wars would happen between Muslims and others. There would be POWs on both sides, prisoners of war on this side and prisoner of war on that side, like it is today. Even today they have, for example, prisoner swaps. One of the brothers was telling me that they were, for example, taken hostage under the Ba'athist regime by Saddam and his men in that time, and there was a prisoner swap, for example, between people. So at that time, Rasulullah, when there used to be people who used to come to this side, the Muslim side, for POWs, they had an option. They could go free two ways. One, they could stay POWs if they wanted. The second was they could go free if they became Muslim, so they're free. But there was a third way, and that was if they just taught 10 Muslims how to read or write or something that they knew. Question, was that person teaching fiqh? That person wasn't even Muslim. So Rasulullah understood the value of knowledge. Rasulullah understood the value of teaching. Rasulullah understood the value of learning and all of these things. I'll tell you this because in our Imam Bargahs, one of the things I want to lay before I leave for the back home is to lay a foundation here, because this is an institution that is known around the world, and hopefully if it spreads from here, it will spread to other communities around the world as well. There's a lot of things that our community needs to share to help other people with. Not the least of which, there are many things. One is how to help our community get strong financially. Each person, number one. How to help each with, of course, halal risk and all of the necessities in therein. How to help each person to be politically active in the political system in society, and also try to make the political system more just if it's not just. Work on that also. The next thing is, for example, mental health. The level of anxiety, the level of depression, the level of challenges that all people in society in America are facing today is the highest, number one. But also in our community, sometimes it's very high. But we don't know the terms. We don't know sometimes what does anxiety mean, what does depression mean. Depression is different. Clinical depression is different than other types of depression. We sometimes say someone's feeling sad, oh, they're depressed. But there's a clinical form of depression, which is a medical term. And that is where medical professionals need to discuss this. There's also things about how to parent in light of the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt and modern science, and how do these two things come together to teach people how to raise their children. Because in the past there was a model, if your child's not listening, you just hit them or strike them and then try to get them to listen. And maybe that'll work to some extent, but today they're showing that that can damage the child more than help the child. So how do you effectively communicate with the child to help them learn and understand? And so sometimes we realize that the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt, the Quran, and what the world says today, they were never taught to the children, let alone the children, they were never taught to the parents. And sometimes they were never taught to the grandparents. But today we live in a new era, a new world, where if we're learning these things and we have these universities in places, and we bring the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt and that together to share with the people, you will notice that we'll give rise to a new community, a new society, one which actually has the akhlaq of the Ahlul Bayt, one which actually has the knowledge of the Ahlul Bayt, one which actually follows in the line of Salman and Abu Dharr and Qambar and Miqdad and the likes of all of these individuals, these great personalities, even Fizza alayhi salam, the one, may Allah bless her and elevate her position, all of these great people, because we don't have this model where there's only the male models, for example Rasulullah, for example Imam Ali, Imam Hussein, And I often mention this and I repeat it. We are those people who follow the Ahlul Bayt, that where we have Rasulullah, Imam Ali, Imam Hussein, right in parallel, we have Bibi Khadija, Bibi Fatima, and Bibi Zainab, salamullahi alayha. The meaning is that we have complete role models, to the point that our ulama, if I had time I would expand on this, our ulama say that Fatima al-Zahra, salamullahi alayha, Bibi Zainab, they have traits that are not based on gender, meaning what? Courage. For example, the courage, the strength, the power of Bibi Fatima giving the sermon in the darbar in Medina, when she's giving that statement, at that point of the Khalifa, and also Bibi Zainab giving the statement in the darbar of Sham. This takes courage that some other men could not do this. Many other men could not have spoken in front of the likes of these personalities. As the poet says, Khatum hai fasle kama, bol rahi hai Zainab, aur kaun bolega jahan, bol rahi hai Zainab, aur tiro shamshiro sinahon ke sitam ke lashkar, thak gayi sabki zaban, bol rahi hai Zainab, thak gayi sabki zaban, bol rahi hai Zainab, और ए यजीद इससे बड़ी हार तेरी क्या होगी, ए यजीद इससे बड़ी हार तेरी क्या होगी, वो तेरा घर है जहां बोल रही है ज़ैनब, ए यजीद इससे बड़ी हार तेरी क्या होगी. The audacity that Sayyidah Zainab salamullahi alayha had to be able to look at that tyrant, Balim, in the face and tell him the truth in front of hundreds of thousands and thousands of people is not easy. So we are the ones who follow courage on the line of Imam Ali alayhi salam and Imam Hussein, but also Fatima al-Zahra and Bibi Zainab salamullahi alayha. These courageous people, that courage, that strength, that honor, it doesn't have any gender. It's above gender. Meaning it is something men and women can learn from. So this is why we need to understand the Ahlul Bayt in that aspect. What I want to discuss tonight is, how can we add value? Imam Ali alayhi salam teaches us that his focus was to look after the most marginalized member of society, meaning the person who no one was caring for, Imam Ali alayhi salam would look after them. So he would say, if there's someone who is aitam, orphan, if someone who's yatim, if there's someone who is a widow, if someone is someone who doesn't have anything, they will look after them. What does the poet say on this? Iqbal, he says, with respect to Fatima al-Zahra, Maryam az yik nisbat Isa aziz, as seh nisbat Hazrat al-Zahra aziz. For one reason, Maryam is exalted. Why? Because she's the mother of Isa alayhi salam. For three reasons, Fatima al-Zahra is exalted and elevated. Why? It says, Noor-e chashma rahmatan lil alameen, on imam-e awwalino akharin. That she is the light, she is the light of the eye of rahmatan lil alameen, Rasulullah, who is the imam of all the anbiya, from the beginning to the end. Then he says a line, Banu-e tajdare halata, murtuza mushkil kusha, sher khuda. Why did he say this line? He's saying this for the whole Muslim world. He's not saying this for Shias, right? He's saying this, that her husband is the one who has the crown of halata. Why? Because there's a chapter of the Quran, Surah Insan, also called Surah Dahr, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Hal ata alal insani hinam min ad-dahri lam yakun shay'an mazkura. That does man not remember there was a time where he was not worthy of mentioning? And then eventually the ayah comes, وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا. And they give out of their love for Allah, they give their food to the poor, the orphan, and the wayfarer. All Muslims accept. Shia, Sunni, does not matter. They all accept this ayah was revealed, and this chapter of the Quran was revealed for Ali, Fatima, and Hasnain. The principle is, the Ahlul Bayt are throughout the Quran. They are there at every moment in time. And we are the ones who need to reflect on and remind the Muslim world, where is it that these verses and these ayat came that the people need to remember and reflect on, that were on the Ahlul Bayt. Because maybe the names were not explicitly taken, but their actions are there. Example, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, this is someone who is respected in the Muslim world according to all Muslims. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud says, there are 4 things that Ali had, fadail, that no one else had. And I would trade this life, I would trade anything. In fact, he says, I would trade the lifespan of Nuh alayhi salam just to get one of these. So he says, you know, as the Quran says, Nuh lived 1,000 years, alfa sinin illa khamsina ama, 1,000 years less 50. Although in the riwayat he lived longer than this, but the Quran mentioned this segment of his life. So he's saying, I would not want, if someone offered me to live 950 years, the length of Nuh, or let's say 1200 years, I would reject that and I would pick this fadila that Ali ibn Abi Talib has. He said, what's the fadila? What is the fadail? He continues, he says, for example, like, where do I begin? He says, for example, the first one. He says, 39 days had passed at Khaybar. And everyone was willing. And Rasulullah said, لَأُوتِيَنَّ الرَّايَةَ غَدًا رَجُلًا كَرَارًا غَيْرَ فَرَارٍ يُحِبُّ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ. The very famous statement. He says, tomorrow I will give the flag to the one who is a man who is advancing, not retreating. Allah and His Prophet love him, and he loves Allah and His Prophet. Now Rasulullah, as the Quran had said before, whenever you want to say something about tomorrow, say inshaAllah. Rasulullah didn't say inshaAllah here, because he knew that this was a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says 39 days, everyone was hoping and wishing that they would be the one who is going to get the flag. Why? Because Rasulullah already gave a sanad and a stamp and approval, and he said that that person loves Allah and Rasul, that's good, but Allah and His Messenger love him. So it's a stamp of approval that this person is the highest after Rasulullah. And by the way, and I'm saying this just clearly, you can read the history, other people also went in the 39 days before Amir al-Mu'mineen, but they weren't able to bring victory. Anyways, Amir al-Mu'mineen is not physically there at that moment in time. When Rasulullah calls out, Nadi Aliya Madhar al-Ajaib. At that point, the narrations say that Amir al-Mu'mineen had an eye ailment. They said, where is Ali? Rasulullah says, where is Ali? Of course he knows, but he's asking the companions. And then they realized that he had an eye ailment, and they said he's not there at the point in time. Rasulullah called on to Amir al-Mu'mineen, and Amir al-Mu'mineen came. At that point in time, Rasulullah took some of his blessed saliva and put it on the eye of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And Amir al-Mu'mineen himself says, after that, I never had a problem seeing, I never saw clearer than that after that. That was the blessedness of Rasulullah and what Allah had given him. A quick point on this, Ayatullah Burjaddi, now these are things of Iman and Irfan and Ma'rifah. Look, sometimes if you start reading the Quran without a guide, without a teacher, without someone, you may start misinterpreting the verses. So sometimes, especially if you begin the Quran from the Surah Baqarah onwards, many times when you look at non-Muslims, if you go to the universities, Columbia, NYU and all of these, they usually tell their students, if you want to understand the Quran, they tell non-Muslims, if you want to understand the Quran better, start from the back, don't start from the front. Which is interesting because in terms of tartib and nuzuli, that's closer to tartib and nuzuli, because the verses in the back are more Meccan and the ones in the front are more Madani. And I tell you this because if you as followers of Ahlul Bayt read the Quran in tartib and nuzuli, you will understand something much more different. It will be much more clearer to you, inshallah. And the way Allah talked, it's exactly how Allah had the conversation, as the Ahlul Bayt used to say, كَلِّمُ النَّاسَ عَلَىٰ قَدْرِ أُقُولِهِمْ. Speak to people on their level. They used to speak to people on their level. So Allah, His tonality, or lahja as we say in Urdu, His tonality in Makkah is different than His tonality in Medina. In Makkah, there was only two groups. In Makkah, there were the kafirs and there were the believers. But in Medina, there was a third phenomenon, which was Muslim, non-Muslim, and munafiq. And in that situation, Allah said that the munafiq would mix truth and falsehood. And they clustered and they made things very difficult because, what is the old saying we say in English? That a full lie is better than a half truth. Half truth, when you mix the truth and falsehood, people say, oh, this sounds true. But then they mix some falsehood into it and they confuse people. And this is what was going on in Medina. Anytime you hear, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, that's a Madani chapter, or Madani verse at least. And that's something that's common. But the style in Makkah, Allah gives quick, short punchlines. Because that's how the Meccans operated. The people in Makkah, they looked at poetry such a way that if you had punchlines and you told them something in a short, poetic form, they would say, wow, this is amazing. So Allah answered them in that way. Surah Fatiha, Surah Ikhlas, and very other things. So, at that point in time, when this is happening, there is the event of Khaybar. But I wanted to share this with you. Ayatullah Burjaddi, and this is something about Ma'rifah and Maqam. He used to not wear glasses he didn't wear glasses till the end of his life. There was a period in the middle where he used to wear reading glasses, but eventually when he got very old, he wasn't wearing glasses. And they said, I told Burjati, why is it that you don't wear glasses, although you used to wear it before, and now you've gotten very old? We would think anybody who's older now, they would have to wear glasses of all time. He said, you want to know the reality? He said, yes. He said, I was on the way to Karbala. I was doing the walk. He was traveling from Najaf to Karbala. May Allah give us all the ziyarah of Sayyid al-Shuhada, inshallah. He says, I had stopped in a camp. And on the camp, I was resting. And I saw one of the zawar of Sayyid al-Shuhada who's on the way, who had stopped and they were resting as well. And I saw that there was a little bit of dust on his feet. And I took that dust while I was having a big eye ailment, big problem with my eyes. He said, I took a little bit of that dust. The person was resting. I borrowed some of that dust and I put it on my eyes. He said, that day and this day, I've never had any need for any glasses or any medication. I'm not telling you to do this, by the way. This is a level of irfan and ma'rifah that's higher. But what I'm saying is there's a power therein of the Ahlul Bayt that we may not be able to explain right now. But believe me, from the bottom of my heart, when I've seen this, as an engineer and a scientist myself, I cannot deny, if someone says something to me one time about Ahlul Bayt, okay, maybe it's a coincidence, maybe it happened. But if someone tells me one time, 2 times, 3 times, 100 times, in different cities, in different places, I cannot deny it. The same way that if someone outside these walls says that they don't believe in Allah, they cannot scientifically say, they say, well, you cannot scientifically prove Allah. But also, they cannot scientifically deny Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have to have evidence to deny. So the same way, even if someone does not understand this, there is something in the barakah of the Ahlul Bayt. Now come back to this. Rasulullah put his blessed saliva in the eye of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Amir al-Mu'mineen went and he brought victory at Khaybar. When he got that flag, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud is saying 4 virtues. He said, number 1 virtue that Ali had, that nobody else had, was that he was given the flag at Khaybar. And everyone wanted that, and that was a stamp of approval that whoever this person is who gets the flag, which was Imam Ali alayhi salam, that person is the one who is loved by Allah and His Prophet. Number 1. He said, I would trade that for the life of Nuh. He says, very well. Wow. Number 1. Number 2, when it comes to this, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he says that on the day of Mubahila, when the verse came, Anfusana wa anfusakum, that is, bring your nafs, yourself, we'll bring ourselves. Rasulullah took Ali ibn Abi Talib as his nafs. That was something that everyone wished, and I wished, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud says, that I wish I got that over the life of Nuh, to be able to be called the nafs of Rasulullah. He says, number 3, Surah Bara'at, Surah Tawbah, the revelation of Surah Bara'at. Surah Tawbah is the one surah in the Quran that does not begin with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Bara'atun min Allah wa Rasul, this chapter. When it was revealed, the narrations say, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud says, that Rasulullah dispatched Abu Bakr to go and give the verses to the other side, to the Meccans. When he's dispatched him to go and give the verses, at that time Jibreel came and told Rasulullah, of course Rasulullah knows, but for you and I to understand, he said, Ya Rasulullah, Allah says that whoever delivers this chapter of Surah Bara'at, Surah Tawbah, it must be either you yourself or someone who is like you, your nafs. And Rasulullah said, O Ali, go and intercept Abu Bakr, stop him and tell him to come back, and go and deliver Surah Bara'at, Surah Tawbah. It was a sanad that Ali ibn Abi Talib was someone who was the nafs of Rasulullah, or equal to the nafs of Rasulullah. We wished we had this. The final thing he says, when the verse came, was Saddal Abwaba illa Baba, that we recite in Dua Nudba and other places, that all of the doors that opened into the masjid of Rasulullah, there used to be doors that opened of all the companions, many companions used to open into the door of Masjidun Nabi. But they did not know about Tahara and Najasa and all of these things, and they would come in whatever state to the masjid. At that point, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya Rasulullah, close all of the doors except the door of Ali and Fatima. So that door always remained open. That's why when Khutbah Fadakiyah happened, Bibi Fatima al-Zahra, she had 2 options. She could have came in the one door that opened into the masjid, or she could have come in from the front door. But she came in from the front door, so people knew. They could not say that, oh, Fatima just came from her side door, we didn't see her come in. She wanted everyone to know. So this is something that all Muslims accept. Now, drawing to a conclusion, based on this, where we began and where we're going, what is the role of the masjid? What is the role of the Imam Bargah? What is the role of the center? One of the things that we can do is, as per the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt, what did Rasulullah say? Rasulullah, as the Quran testifies, and Rasulullah himself says in numerous places, there were certain things. And the narration that I told you at the beginning, where Rasulullah says, I've come to teach you. I've come to teach. So what is it? إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِيُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمُ الْأَخْلَاقِ. Rasulullah says, I have been sent to teach you the best conduct, the noblest conduct, makarim al-akhlaq. There are two types of akhlaq in Islam, ethics, morals. One is makarim al-akhlaq, the other is mahasin al-akhlaq. Makarim al-akhlaq, we recite dua makarim al-akhlaq, but sometimes we don't know what we're reciting. So I'm just giving a summary. Mahasin al-akhlaq is that akhlaq that you do good for me, I do good back to you. So you get me an Eid gift, I get you an Eid gift back. You get me a gift, I give you a gift back. You do good to me, I do good back to you. If you don't do anything for me, I don't do anything for you. But makarim al-akhlaq is different. Makarim al-akhlaq is, does not matter what you do, does not matter what I do, does not matter if you give me something or not, I treat you well. Because my treating you well is not dependent on you treating me well. My treating you well is dependent on my akhlaq tells me that I must treat you well. And that's the principle. This is another thing of, sometimes you'll find in Desi culture, log kya kahenge is one. Another thing that you'll find is, ki if people give you respect, then you're respectable. I'm sorry, based on this, Imam Ali, people tried to disrespect him. Was Imam Ali, na'udhu billah, hasha lillah, someone who was disrespected? No, it showed their akhlaq, it showed their silliness. Imam Ali is Imam Ali alayhi salam. So what I'm trying to tell you is, tu'izzu man tasha wa tudhillu man tasha. The honor is in Allah's hands and dishonor is in Allah's hands. Trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And be very careful if the people are saying that you are respected. Because it's very possible in the eyes of Allah, you may not be respected. The principle being this: do not think that your respect is outward, your respect is inward. Self-respect is the most important thing. That's why Imam Hussein alayhi salam told the other side in Karbala, you need to make sure that if you don't believe in religion, you don't believe in akhirah, إِن لَمْ يَكُنْ دِينٌ وَلَا تَخَافُونَ الْمَعَادِ فَكُونُوا أَحْرَارًا فِي دُنْيَاكُمْ. At least be free in this dunya. Because he knew they were slaves. They were slaves to their desires. They were slaves to their wills. So now coming back to this, what can we do in the Imam Barga, the Husayniyah? One thing is, you can help people understand how to communicate effectively. You know, in Makarim al-Akhlaq, Mahasin al-Akhlaq, I reflect like a mirror. Like a mirror, I reflect what you do. Makarim al-Akhlaq is when that old lady used to throw rubbish and trash on Rasulullah, and one day she didn't, and Rasulullah asked, where is she? And she said, have you come to take revenge? And Rasulullah said, no, I have come to ask, do you need anything? Can I help you? What's wrong? I'm here of your service. And that changed her completely. The same way when Imam Hassan alayhi salam, the Shami, came from Sham and started cursing to Imam Hassan. And the people got very upset. He said, relax. Imam Hassan said, because look, he is only telling you the propaganda that he's been fed by Muawiyah. He doesn't know me. And if I treat him harshly, it will validate everything he's heard. Then they'll start believing Muawiyah. It's my job to show him what is the true akhlaq. So understand that your izzah, your respect lies in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not the people. I gave you the story of Luqman the other night. You can never become happy trying to please the people. It will never happen. So now coming back to this, how to effectively communicate. I deal with this a lot because in our communities, like the broader community, husband and wife, they are not taught how to communicate effectively. They are not taught that if they're upset, how to speak to the other person. And eventually what happens is they begin to shout at one another. And when they begin to shout at one another, this has an effect on the children sometimes. And when this has an effect on children sometimes, the children learn this and they pass it on to their next generation. So one way that we can solve this problem is to teach the akhlaq of the Ahlul Bayt. Then we have a panel discussion program with child experts, doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists who can tell you how does the brain of a child work and how does the brain of an adult work and how can you discuss things so that you beautifully resolve these problems. Narrations say Ali and Fatima, when they were married, there was not a single argument in their house ever. Now, okay, they're Ahlul Bayt, sure. But even if you look at the life of the likes of Fidla or Salman and Abadar and those people, they also followed the akhlaq of the Ahlul Bayt. So this is one thing that you can do. One thing that I'll give you before we close tonight is this. Try to use I statements. You know, sometimes you get upset, husband, wife get upset at each other, father, son get upset at each other, people in the family get upset at each other. Rather than just getting upset and shouting and yelling, just try this. The statement goes this way. They teach this in Saga. I feel blank. When you blank, can you please not blank? This was taught as part of training at Microsoft. I was in Seattle. The executive top tier management at Microsoft was taught this. This was part of training that was $50,000 per executive. So you're not going to pay that, but I'm going to give you advice that's just as valuable. So rather than getting upset and running out and shouting and all this, you say, I feel sad or I feel angry when you talk to me like this. Can you please not talk to me like that? For example, this is one way. And you can always fill in the blanks, but it's called I statements. And you say, I feel sad when you ignore me. Can you please pay attention to me? This is much more effective in terms of communicating with the other person than just shouting and thinking that you start beating like King Kong and start trying to get your way. Akhlaq is what the Ahlul Bayt focused on. And this is what we have to do not only in our homes, but also in our Imam Bargahs, in our Husayniyat. That is, if the way that people are acting with each other is not based on the akhlaq of the Ahlul Bayt, people will see that and they'll say that the way this place is being run is based on whoever has the jiski lati jiski. That same principle. وصلى الله على رسول الكريم وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة، وعلي بن الحسين زين العابدين، ومحمد بن علي الباكر، وجعفر بن محمد الصادق، وموسى بن جعفر الكاظم، وعلي بن موسى الرضا، ومحمد بن علي الجواد التكي، وعلي بن محمد الهادي النكي، والحسن بن علي العسكري. السلام عليك يا حجة بن الحسن القائم المنتظر المهدي، يا صاحب العصر والزمان، أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم